This is The Long Road to Publishing, the podcast where we hear from authors who have traveled a long and bumpy road to publishing their books. Whether you're just starting out on your own writing and publishing journey, or if you're all too aware of the many possible detours along the way, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Eva Langston, author, writing instructor, and creator of Eva's newsletter for writers on Substack. Thank you so much for coming along on the ride. It was so much fun to talk with Michelle Maryk, who has had a long career in acting and sketch writing, and whose debut novel, The Found Object Society, has just been released from Disney Hyperion. Michelle and I discuss how her acting background informs her writing, how she got hooked on writing conferences, and of course, her writing and publishing journey. A quick reminder to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and spread the word to other writers about the long road to publishing. Also, Michelle mentions a lot of authors and conferences in this episode. You can find a list of all of them in the show notes. And of course, you can find all of my guests' books, as well as books we mention on the show, at my bookshop shop, the link to which is also in the show notes. Now, on with the episode, which I'm calling Confessions of a Conference Junkie, or Yes and Treating Writing Like Improv. Michelle Maryk graduated from Cornell University and also attended the Yale Writers Workshop. She has been a full-time voiceover artist as well as a commercial and comedic actor for over 25 years. The Found Object Society is a novel of speculative suspense and her debut. She's also a dual citizen of Sweden and the US. Fun fact, Michelle starred with Oscar winner Cliff Robertson in an atrocious horror movie written by her dad. So welcome to The Long Road to Publishing, Michelle.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Are you going to tell us the name of this horror movie so we can all watch it and see how bad it is?
Yeah, the only thing is you can never get that time back in your life. So I'll tell you. Yeah, it's called The 13th Child.
Oh.
And it's about the Jersey Devil. It's really not very good.
Okay, we've been warned. But some people like that. Some people like to watch really bad movies.
It's great. In fact, it was so bad, someone wrote a really bad review about it, and it was so hilarious that I actually reached out to the guy and I was like, that was so funny. And I was like, you're absolutely right. And ever since then, we've sort of stayed in touch.
Oh, that's funny. Well, okay, we are recording this. Your book is going to be coming out soon, The Found Object Society. First of all, how are you feeling on the eve of this book launch?
I am feeling excited, nauseous, a little more excited, a little more nauseous. It just depends on the hour or the day. In general, I'm so busy with different things that, I think it was worse maybe a month ago, but now that it's so close, it's just like there are 8 billion things going on. Yeah, you're just nervous because you're like, how's it going to go? Are people going to like it? Are people going to write me mean reviews? And am I going to have to become their friends?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, good. I'm glad I'm keeping you busy.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, do you want to just give us a quick pitch so that I've read the book? I absolutely loved it.
Thank you.
It was such a unique premise. It was so much fun. I was like, wow, I don't think I've ever read a book quite like this before.
Thank you.
But yeah, do you want to tell us what it's about and entice everyone to go read it?
Yes, of course. Here, I'm going to hold it up, first of all, because it's so pretty.
So pretty.
It's very metallic and groovy, and I know you're seeing it in reverse, but so The Found Object Society is, as you said, a book of speculative suspense, and it centers around Greta Davenport, who is a deeply troubled socialite who one night almost crashes her car while driving drunk. And when she stumbles home and through her front door, this blank card suddenly appears. It's slid under her door. It's blank. It's white. She kind of forgets about it. Next morning, she happens to have her phone open to her camera and it locks onto a QR code. And the QR code is a link, a very trippy link to the Found Object Society. It's an invitation where members spend exorbitant amounts of money to select an object from any era or region, and simply by holding it, they can experience the death of the last person who died touching it. And because she's Greta, these are very addictive experiences. They're called voyages. And she sort of starts to learn how to game the system and perhaps try and go back and change a very traumatic incident in her past.
Yes. Yeah, and that I mean that was part of what was really interesting too, is because she has several of these voyages, and I guess she relives kind of the days leading up to the death. So then it's
Yes.
almost like you get a little taste of like historical fiction in one of
Yep.
them, or you
Hmm.
kind of get these other perspectives.
It's from the people who eventually die. It's from their point of view. So it's a little, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie like Being John Malkovich, but it's a little like that. Like you're in, in that person. And you go to 19th century France, 1970s mid-coast California, and 1920s Chicago.
Yeah, no, that was exactly what I thought when I was reading it. I was like, oh, this is kind of like being John Malkovich.
Yeah.
But yes. Okay. Well, so we are going to get into how this book came to be, but I do
Hmm.
want to kind of go back in time a little
Yeah.
bit. And well, I guess my first question for you is I'm curious about your background in acting. Like, I don't know, did you always want to be like an actor and a writer, or was it acting came first and then writing came later?
Maybe acting was more at the forefront, but writing was always there.
Okay.
As a kid, my dad was actually an author and wrote a horror novel with someone else that did actually quite well. It was called Death Bite, and it was way, way back when. And he was also an actor. So there's a lot of dad influence here. I think I always had that side of me. Like I remember in fifth grade, I was cast as Violet Beauregard in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. That was my first acting experience, and it was the best. Like I memorized the whole script in one night. And then also I had like a little green spiral notebook, and I wrote poems, and I started writing a really crappy novel called I Hate Tuna, and it I was a
Okay.
kid, and I really hate tuna, canned tuna. But essentially, it was like the story Alive, the nonfiction story where it's like about a plane crash and people have to resort to cannibalism because they crash into the mountain. And it's essentially that, but instead of cannibalism, it's a cargo load full of canned tuna. And so
Oh, and this is how desperate she is she has to eat
yeah,
the
that she
tuna.
will eat the canned tuna. Those things sort of, it was like dual tracky. In college, I actually was an English major, but really spent most of my time in the theater department. I was my first improv experience was with an improv group that I got into there. So, like my mindset when my teachers wanted me to go and get my MFA was I want to go be on SNL. So I was writing more I wrote a book of short stories for my thesis, but at that point after college, it was more about sketch writing and one woman shows and that sort of thing.
So did you get your MFA in writing?
There was no MFA.
Oh,
No
okay, no
MFA at
MFA.
all.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, my English professors were like, you should really go to Iowa or something. And I was like, Iowa, Schmiowa. I
You're like,
was
I want to
like,
be on SNL.
I'm going to meet Lorne Michaels.
Okay, all right. So then you were doing a lot of acting work.
Yes.
And so then when did you feel like, because I know you've written at least several manuscripts at this point, when did
Yeah.
you feel like, okay, I do want to try writing a novel and kind of got serious about doing that?
Yeah, there was really a distinct moment, and it wasn't that long ago. Because like I said, I've written screenplays and sketches and stuff, and I don't know, just at one point I was like, I really want to get back to narrative fiction, and I thought in my wildest dreams I'd never be able to write a novel. But in October 2019, I bought the Scrivener application. I don't know if you use that. I love it so much. And I learned how to use it, and I started writing my first novel called The Overgrown. And because I'm sort of a cocky idiot, like between having imposter syndrome and thinking I'm super awesome, I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm doing it. I'm getting an agent. And so I started sort of diving in and researching and, reaching out and querying, like probably too early.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Common mistake. Yeah.
Common mistake. Yeah. And then, yeah. And so it just sort of built from there, started going to writing conferences. I know we might talk about that a little bit, but that was the launching point. So really, less than 7 years ago, like about 6 years ago. And since then I've written four novels, and the Found Object Society was officially the third one I've written, and the
Okay.
first one to be published.
All
Yeah.
right. I want to pick apart a couple of things here. So I want to go back to Scrivener because I do have Scrivener and I have used it for revising. I wonder if you can just explain for people who might not be familiar with Scrivener
Yeah.
what it is and how you use it.
Yeah, I'm sure, like a new fancy car that has like so many things you don't even know how to use. I'm sure I use just a fraction
Same.
of what's available in Scrivener. So the big thing is not to get overwhelmed by what you can do and just use it for what makes you comfortable. What I do before I dive into actually starting a manuscript is I use my phone. Notes is like my favorite app. I start with an idea, like usually almost a title and the log line. And then I just start writing notes into my phone. And I'm like, oh, what about this? What about this? And then I just cut and paste those into there's like a side margin on Scrivener. And I
You could
just
like move stuff
I can
around
move
and
stuff
yeah,
around, and it's all like I'm sure I totally use it wrong, but it's what works for me and that's how it should be used. Whatever works for you. Like there's no right or wrong. And the beautiful thing is you can just move everything.
hmm.
And the more minutia, kind of macro oriented you can get with it, the more fun you can have because you can be like, nope, move that scene up there.
Yeah.
So I write in scenes and then later break it into chapters because I'll be like, okay, this scene goes here, it like matches this one, and we'll put two or three in one chapter. And I like to keep my chapters short. I write my first draft like that. I revise that way, and when I do like a revision or two, then I export it to Microsoft.
Yeah. I was writing like a dual timeline
Hmm.
novel and it was really helpful for that because then I
Yeah.
literally like I wrote like one timeline through and then the other one
Yeah.
and then I could like move everything around and decide how they were gonna intersperse. So yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear you say that you often start with a premise because that's what I do too. And you hear a lot of writers, I think, say, like, oh, I start with a character. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I start with like a what if this happened? And then
Right.
and then I figure out who it's happening to.
It depends. I Found Object Society was definitely a premise. Cigarette Girl was a little bit that's the second novel I wrote. That's a little bit like character and a bit of a
Mm,
premise. And The Overgrown, yeah, yeah, it can be a little bit of both.
yeah, no,
Um,
that makes sense.
but I find if you can have the clarity of that kernel of a premise, that's going to make it all better. Like,
Yeah. Well, and I guess everybody's different. I have a friend who says she'll often start with like a setting that really grabs her, and
hmm
then she'll be like, okay, well, what would happen in the setting? And so I think, yeah, everybody kind of gets to it from a different
yeah.
place. Okay, so you started writing these novels, you started querying. Tell me about your experience with querying and like how did you eventually get your agent?
So I started querying with The Overgrown, and I actually had surprisingly positive results. I sort of knew a few people. So I got a couple like intros to like certain agents sometimes, but nothing came of it. They were like, you said positive things, but nothing happened. And so, when that was taking long, then I started writing Cigarette Girl, and sort of was honing my craft. And then I started querying that. And then I was like getting closer and closer, getting requests, but not all the way there. The agent I ultimately signed with, she read The Overgrown, really liked a lot of it, was like, but no, do you have anything else? And the great thing, if someone says that, is to be able to say yes. So,
Hmm.
like, don't just sit on one manuscript, like, keep going. It doesn't mean you're forgetting about the other one. And so I was like, yeah. So I sent her Cigarette Girl, and then I'm leaping forward a little bit here, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And then I started having interest from other people, and I started writing Found Object Society in April of 23, and was done by early August of 23. And so by the time I heard back from Victoria, my now agent, I'd had other interest in Cigarette Girl, and then she was like, "Oh, this is so close, you know." she's like, what's that thing you're working on? What's the other thing? And so I was like, well, there's another agent interested, but because this isn't ready. She's like, well, just tell me what it's about. And so I gave her a synopsis. She was like, holy shit. She's like, I don't care how much of a first draft it is. Can you just maybe try and quickly clean up 50 pages? And I promise I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So I did. I cleaned up 50 something pages and like within a week, she was like, "Wow." So we met and I ended up, talking to a couple people, but I went with Victoria and
Interesting. So she decided she wanted to sign you just having read the like 50 pages of,
yep,
but she had read other manuscripts of yours as
yes,
well. I think
yes,
that, yeah, I think that's important because it's like she knew you could finish the novel. She'd
yep,
seen other manuscripts from you, and then she was like, okay, this is the idea. This is it.
yep, this is it. And it was a little nerve-wracking too, because, I was like, okay, now we're signed and I'm going to clean up the rest. And then I was like, wow, what if she really hates it, after those 50 pages?
Yeah.
Um, but she didn't. Yeah, but
Okay.
but what I liked was, she had taken the time to read everything that I'd written, given me very meaningful notes. And and if she had just been like, "Oh, you're good. Yeah, let's sign for the overgrown," I probably would have never written the Found Object
Mm.
Society. And I think it's definitely, I love the other two. But this is like my best of those three.
Yeah, it
Um,
pushed you to keep getting
yeah.
better, keep going. Well, and I think you said something important too, which is like it's always good to have something else you're working on because, well, in this case, the agent was like, not this one, but what else do you have? But also,
Hmm.
I know when you have kind of like the call with an agent who's interested, one of the things they always ask is, what else are you working on? What other
Hmm.
ideas do you have? What other projects do you want to do? Yeah, I think, of course, love that one project, but then
Yeah.
move on to something else and have
Yeah.
other projects.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And also, I mean, like just from retaining your sanity, like just sitting around waiting and like looking at Query Tracker and like waiting for responses and wondering like, are they going to get back to me? Why haven't they? Or, it's terrible. Like,
Yeah.
and immersing yourself in writing, like feeling good about what you're doing as opposed to being beholden to what someone else might or might not think is, so important.
Yeah. Well, okay. So then you signed with Victoria and tell me about that process from,
Yeah.
working with her and going on submission and getting the book deal.
Yeah. What I loved about, what I've already spoken about, what I liked about Victoria. But in addition, I wanted an editorial agent. I didn't want someone who's just like, seems okay to me.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Let's see what happens. And so she gave me good notes. And so I did a revision, and then we started going out on sub in March 24. And that was a new kind of nerve wracking, um, for sure.
Yeah.
We started getting no's, but the no's were like cloaked in so much positivity that we were like, wait, you're saying no, or it's anxiety making. But then finally in May, so really just like a couple months later, which isn't so terrible, we got this call from Hyperion from Chelsea at Hyperion Avenue, which is a division of Disney Publishing. And then because that happened, all of a sudden, a couple other people were
Hmm.
interested. So I had a call with Chelsea, and I'm glad I had the call with her first. I'll get to why that is in a minute. And it was like she got the novel like so well, it was like almost like she'd written it with me.
Mm.
And something I'd sort of secretly harbored and not uttered to a soul was, gosh, I think you could really do like a sequel or prequel to this. That would be fun. And I hadn't
Uh-huh.
said to anyone, and sure enough, in our conversation, she was like, have you ever considered like a sequel or prequel? And I was like, hmm. I was like, yes, I have.
Yeah.
They haven't bought it yet. I wish, they had done like a 3 book deal or something, but it's not uncommon that they want to see how a book does. So,
Right.
so we'll see
Yeah.
how it does.
So everybody
And
needs to buy it so that Michelle can
yes,
sell the sequel or
yes,
prequel.
please. That would be really nice.
Yeah.
And then I met with another editor. So that was really positive. It was great. Met with another editor, and she was like, "I've never heard a more original premise. I'm freaking out. This is the best." She was like, "But She's like, could we make Greta less of a bad girl? What if she's like a really good girl and makes one mistake? And I'm like, and you kind of have to play along. You want a couple people to be offering. So you
Yeah.
can't be like, you're an idiot. No. So I was like, huh. And she's like, and the whole addiction thing, can we play that down? And I'm like, wow, okay. And she's like, and let's just cut to the chase and let's make it just like a ton more voyages, which for those who haven't read the book, voyages are the deaths. And
Mhm.
just dive right in. And she said, literally, I'm quoting, bring on the glamour, bring on the glitz. And I was like, this is all so interesting. And so we ended our call and I talked to Victoria. I was like, please God, let Hyperion make a good offer because
Yeah.
I can't do this. And anyway, so long story short, that's where we went.
Oh gosh. And then I'm just thinking like, what if that had been your only offer? I mean,
Yeah,
and then you'd have to decide like how badly do I want this? Because that would have made your book completely different.
I
And
don't
it
think I would have done it. I think I would have held out.
yeah, well that's good to hear because I mean, you're just saying that and listeners can't see, but I'm like sitting here shaking my head like, no,
No,
no, that's a terrible idea. Like,
no, it would have been
yeah.
awful. And yes, like some people are not going to love Greta, but I mean, like how cute and cuddly are the Succession characters,
Right.
or
Yeah,
like,
she is an
you
interesting
know, the
character.
hunting wives or, I mean, they're not, and the idea is that like my hope is, in all of us, hopefully, maybe not a select few, but there are redemptive qualities.
Well, and this is so it's also making me think when you were talking about, the agents kind of going gaga over the premise, because I don't know if you saw this, but I just wrote a Substack article about how important I think, especially right now, it is to have a really easy to pitch, attention grabbing premise
Yeah.
because there's just so much noise.
Mhm.
Agents, editors, readers are being inundated with so many options
Yeah.
that if you, and I used your book as an example
Oh,
because yeah, you'll have to look at it because yeah, you can just say like a mysterious secret society, wealthy people can experience someone else's death just by holding the object that person was holding when they died.
yep.
Boom. I did it
Yep.
in like, one
Yep.
sentence and
Elevator
everyone's
pitch. Yep.
right. And, you had these other books that were clearly good enough to be getting some interest, but it wasn't
Mhm.
until you had this really knockout premise that everybody was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's
Now,
pretty high concept.
yeah.
It's like of what I've written, it's like the most high concept. That seems to help an elevator pitch too. So
Yeah. And yet, and I don't know if you would classify yourself as this or not, but like, I mean, the writing itself is, I don't know if you want to say literary, but I mean, your
thank
writing is
you.
is gorgeous
Thank
and
you.
it's not, I don't think you have to like compromise quality writing for a
Mm-mm.
commercial premise is what I'm
No,
saying.
no, I thank you, first of all. But yeah, I mean, I I've always been drawn to like beautiful, lush prose that like makes me feel something. And I know like people talk about Stephen King a lot and he has a billion books and they're all like high concept, but he writes beautifully. Like he
Mhm.
really does. Like there's just some beautiful, you're like, wow, how do you see that like from this 10-year-old boy's point of view? And like there's so hopefully the book is pacey enough, but I'm not like a bang, 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 like plot,
Right.
plot, 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 constant dialogue, boom, boom, boom. That's just not my thing. I love dialogue, but I try and mix it up and
Yeah.
I write visually. I'm seeing the scene play out in my head as I'm writing.
Hmm.
And that probably also has to do with, the acting background and
Yeah, it's like you have to hook a reader with the premise, but then to keep them there, you have to have the writing. Well, since you mentioned the acting background, tell me about how do you feel like your acting background and your improv background have jived with your writing?
I'm actually writing an essay for Writer's Digest about how improv improved my writing. So this will be good practice.
Yeah, yeah.
But it has made such a huge difference. I mean, if you think about it, writing, novel writing, short story, it is improv. I mean, you're sitting down and you are creating a scene, you're creating the characters, you're creating the plot. And the best thing you can do is to like let your mind go, like
Mm.
not overthink, not overanalyze. I was a goofy kid and I always loved like Gilda Radner and Carol Burnett, and I didn't know what to do with these like feelings, and like I want to be goofy, not like a pretty girl and behave in a certain way. And when I discovered improv in college, I was like, oh, I can just go. And I mean, it can be a disaster. Um, and it can be like transcendent. There
Hmm.
are some, and it doesn't have to be comedic all the time. I mean, it depends on what you're doing. If you do like long form improv, like they're called heralds, those can have some really deep, meaningful moments. But the key really is to not overthink. And so when I write, I'm not a plotter. I have my notes and I have ideas. I usually kind of know the beginning, like I knew the first line of my novel and I knew the last line of my
Oh,
novel.
cool.
Um,
Hmm.
Pre-epilogue. The epilogue was a separate thing. And then I knew like points, and I was like, I'm just gonna see where it goes, see where it takes me. That sort of confidence and willingness to just sort of trust that somehow, like not my all the way forward brain, like the back brain will come out and discover what I need to discover. Like when Greta first stumbles out of the found object society after her first voyage, I was like, okay, she's going into an alley, and I'm just sort of writing, and I'm like, oh, that would be embarrassing if you're puking in an alley and you meet someone. I'm like, hmm. I'm like, oh, and what if he's like a gorgeous guy? And so she saw him, I saw him, and I was like, and this is what he looks like, and this is, and this is his name, and so.
So it was like a yes and moment.
It is, it's
Yeah.
all yes and it helps so much with dialogue too, because as an improviser, you have the ability to hear, because you should be a good listener, to hear what the other person is saying. So you develop this ability to be able to say like one person's line and what the natural response maybe from the other person would be. And what I do actually is if I'm worried about it, I pull all the dialogue like from sections and then just line them up like they're a script. I'm like, oh, okay, this works. Oops, this doesn't work. And then I'll tweak it and then throw it back in.
Oh, I love
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah, but it's if there's like one like path that has made this version of Michelle Maryk, it's the improv. I think it just forever like changed the way my mind works creatively.
Like you said, the confidence of like when you're doing improv, you just have to go out on stage and be like, I'm just confident that something is going to come to me. And
Yep,
I think so many writers have that fear of the blank page,
yep,
and just having that confidence of like, and I think the more you do it, the more confident you get of like, I came up with something last time, if it's like a plot hole or it's like, I don't know what's going to happen next. It's like, I just have to be confident that I'm going
yeah,
to come up with something. And I guess the benefit of writing over improv is that you can always change it and you can always make it better.
yeah. I mean, if you're on the stage in improv, you can't like stop and be like, hang on, I got to think about this.
Right.
Wait, give me a few minutes. You can't do that. So you just have to keep going. And then I mean, it's also not to say like when I'm writing a first draft, like every single time, every morning, I wake up slightly terrified that I'm not going to be able to come up. Like, I'm like, why am I like I wrote like 2,000 words yesterday? Like, why am I? But every time it happens. But I guess maybe somehow that fear is good. And then I'm like, oh, I did. Okay, I did it. I wrote again. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just like the same thing the next day. I'm like, are you ever going to stop being afraid every morning? And no,
This is maybe a random question. Well, maybe not because we're talking about fears, but do you still get stage fright even after years of doing acting?
not really. No, I think it can depend on what it is. If it's like so in my wheelhouse, like, hey, Michelle, they want you to, improvise and play with this script and be funny, then I'm okay. Like I'm rarely too flustered. Inside, like I can be a little nervous, but it's more about the waiting to either go on or for a camera to roll that's
Hmm.
that's nerve-wracking. But once you're in it, it's so fun being on a set. And I used to do when Late Night with Conan O'Brien was in New York City, I was like a regular sketch performer. So that was like a whole
Oh,
other
cool.
because you're performing in front of a live audience, so you could not mess up. And you'd hear about it from Conan if you did something wrong.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so here's another acting tangential question because you had mentioned before we started officially recording that
Hmm.
you've decided not to read your audiobook.
Ah,
And I
yeah.
was like, oh, you have all this voiceover work in your background. So
Yeah.
what made you decide not to do your own audiobook?
Well, I've done a ton of voiceovers, and I do enjoy long narrations. Like I do a lot of long kind of medical stuff. But audiobook narration is truly a craft, like of its own. And the people who do it, the woman who did mine, Saskia Maarleveld, she is like incredible. She did like Out of the Woods. She's done like 700 books.
Oh my gosh.
Taylor
Wow.
Swift, like just was listening to it and mentioned her. I mean, she's amazing. Um, and it's what they do. She does like 60 books a year. And could I do it? Yeah. But I don't know that I do it as well. And I also very much wanted to be sure I was associated as the author, like people thinking about me as the author of this book, as opposed to moving their mind of like, oh, how did she do in the narration? Or,
Mm.
I didn't want that. And I'm so happy. And Saskia and I actually met her on the last day of recording, which was so fun. But we talked about like she doesn't do commercials. Like she can't do commercials. And I'm like, I can do commercials.
Right.
And I'm like, you do the book, I'll do commercials. And so, they're just different animals
Yeah.
completely. And I wanted to, I was actually kind of proud of myself. I was like, would I have, done that like 10 years ago or 15 years ago? Would I have said someone else should do it? Maybe not. Like I'm older, so, comfortable enough in my skin to be like, you do this, you're going to do it beautifully. And sure enough, I was like, she was reading, it was at the end and she was
Hmm.
like before the epilogue. And I was literally I'm almost like crying now in the studio listening to her like say my words. And I was like, I was literally crying in the studio. It was just beautiful. I was like, I couldn't do that. I don't want to do that. Um,
Yeah.
I did my author's note. They let me record my author's note
Mm.
and my acknowledgments, and that was fine.
That seems like a good balance. And then yeah,
Yeah.
you let the person who's this is the thing that they do. And I'm sure she brings something else to it, like I
Hmm.
think especially when you're traditionally publishing, you're getting all of these other people, like the book is it's yours, but now you're getting kind of like, I don't know, other people
Interpreting.
interpreting
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I was thinking too, because I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and we've been reading kind of longer books to the 6-year-old recently.
Hmm.
It is hard. Like I'm like feeling like I need to work on my breath work or something because I'm sitting here reading like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I'm like, taking gasping breaths because the like sentences are so long, and
Yeah.
it's not easy. I can
It's not.
imagine it's kind of exhausting to narrate
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
So.
Well, she just did. Do you know the book Alchemized that just came out? It's
Mm,
gigantic. It's
I don't think so.
1,100 pages. It's like an 8 billion time bestseller, but it's a 33-hour audiobook.
Oh my gosh.
So I think they count about like 1.5 to 2 hours to record per hour of what the audiobook
Mm,
ends up being.
hmm.
So that is like so much studio time. And yeah, it's just like Herculean. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable,
Yeah. Well, okay. So going back to the Found Object Society, which by the way, when this episode comes out, the book will be out in the world so people can go
right?
and get it.
In all its forms, by the way. You can get hardcover, paperback, audio, and Kindle. They're all being released at the same time.
Do you have any insight into why? Because a lot of times it's like the hardback comes out first and then the paperback later. So why did they decide to do both?
I am told that this is beginning to happen more and more because people don't want to spend that much. I used to wait for the paperback to come out. So
Hmm.
that impacts your first year sales by a lot. So, some people are hardcore and they want the hardcover, but the paperback is there. So, hopefully it'll like boost sales like
Yeah.
from the get-go.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that because I am one of those people that like I'm just I don't know, I guess I'm kind of a Scrooge and I'm like, "Oh, that's a lot of money for,
It
a
is
hardback book." But yeah,
a
and
lot.
also I read in bed a lot and like when you're under the covers with a hardback, that's kind
I
of I
know it
need
doesn't
the
work.
paper, I need the
Uh-huh.
paperback or the ebook. Yeah. Okay, well that's good to know. Well, so what how are you preparing for your book launch or do you have anything exciting in the works to
Yeah.
celebrate?
Yeah, I'm well, it will long be out by the time this airs, but we're doing a really fun launch event in New York City. For those who haven't read the book, they're two very important locations, both in the South Street Seaport. One is 273 Water Street, which is a very old building, and that's where the Found Object Society supposedly exists in the bowels beneath the building. And the building itself, like, truly has a very dark disturbing history. It's
Oh.
very old. It's the third oldest building in the city. I'm actually doing something on Untapped New York City about like the book because they're into historical stuff. And then there's also the Richard Haas mural, which was painted in the 70s, which is a trompe l'oeil mural of like buildings and the Brooklyn Bridge, and that plays a huge part. Anyway, so the location for the party is a bar called Quick Eternity, and it's literally 200 feet from both those locations.
Oh,
So
cool.
that's going to be very fun. I'm going to be in conversation with Fiona Davis, who's amazing. She's a New York Times bestselling author, major historical fiction writer, and just wonderful. Yeah, and there'll be fun things there, bespoke cocktails, and then we have like a whole tour. Yeah, I'll be going to places in New Jersey, up here near us in the Hudson Valley, a couple places in South Carolina. Boston, Texas, California, Washington. So I'll be in motion for the next 2 months.
What I've heard, and you can correct me, is that when you go on a book tour, maybe, your publisher sets up a book tour, it's often like places that you have a connection with already.
Mhm.
Is that the case for
Yeah,
you?
pretty much was. I hired my own publicist, which is maybe an entirely different conversation we can have another time. But she has literally saved my life. Like she saved my sanity. She's incredible, Kathleen Carter. Thank you. But she essentially has booked this entire tour. Thankfully, Hyperion is, willing to pay for a chunk of it at least.
Hmm.
But, you know, uh, well in advance, we came up with what are places where you know people or you have a connection. So mostly the places are that. Some of them are just like events where, she pitched and they wanted
Hmm.
me to come there. So it's true. Connections are good. And then my friend Danielle Girard, I know her and Ashley Winstead, and I was like, and Ashley, her book just came out a couple days ago, and Danielle has a book coming out 2 weeks after mine. I was like, you guys want to do something in Houston together, Murder by the Book? They were like, yeah. So we pitched that to them. So the three of us are doing that in Houston, and then Danielle and I are doing like a mini Texas tour because she was like, come do this with me in Terabang in Dallas, and so we're doing that together.
Okay, well, so speaking of connections and community, you had mentioned to me that writers' conferences were kind of like your MFA because you didn't get an MFA. So do you
Yep.
want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I first started, writing and, I really go down the rabbit hole on stuff. Like if I'm going to do it, I really want to do it right and understand it. So my first writers conference was AWP.
Oh my
In
gosh, what a way to start.
I know, in Philly. I mean, it was kind of overwhelming, but I was like, wow, these panels are great. And I remember first panel I saw, I think it was writing from different POVs, and it had Angie Kim, Jean Kwok, Rebecca Makkai,
Oh,
and
wow.
I was like enthralled. And cut to several years later now, Angie Kim and Jean Kwok are friends, and they blurb my book. So all this to say that like that was my dip and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then I heard about Thrillerfest and I was like, oh, that's good. And it's in New York. And like that was it. Like those were my people. First night at Thrillerfest, I had my little badge on and I went to the hotel bar and I didn't know anyone. I was like, doo doo doo. And it takes a lot actually for me to be like to be willing to just go into a place and not know anybody.
Hmm.
Now I'm fine with it. But so this gorgeous woman starts waving at me, like from across the room, like at this time.
Uh-huh.
She's like, hi. I'm like, Me? And she's like, yeah. And it's Georgina Cross. And she's like, oh, you're a writer. And so we start talking. Literally 5 minutes later, Claire McIntosh comes over and we're talking. And you guys don't have to Google these people if you don't.
Yeah.
Sorry. But they're really amazing thriller writers. And so like Claire buys me a Prosecco and I buy her. And so that's how it all started. And I can't emphasize enough how this has prepared me for being a published author.
Mm.
I became unafraid to talk to people and meet with them and go to panels and learn and listen. And this is not to poo-poo an MFA. I'm a little older than a lot of y'all. So it's not to say I wouldn't go to an MFA. Like if it was a long time ago, that could have been cool. But whatever path my life took, it took me to this place now, which I'm very happy with. And so I was like, oh, I love these. And I was like, oh, Bouchercon, what's Bouchercon? And so my first Bouchercon was in Minneapolis. Then I met Danielle Girard and I met Laura McHugh and Vera Kurian and April. And like, those people are my friends and they've blurbed my book. And, we, Kathleen Barber, and we just started like hanging out. And it's this wonderful, generous community. Like, I have plenty of acting friends, but it's nothing like this. There's not the backstabbing, and it could be different. I hear different things about like rom-coms or YA or that kind of stuff. Like, seriously, I don't know. But thriller writers are just the best. Everyone's like, what can I do? How can I help you? But it was like all of that experience and like going and taking the time to go to events like that aren't,
Mm.
book launches. It's made all the difference in the world and all the connections. I mean, go in with like sincerity and an open heart and mind. And, there's so much to learn. Yeah, I don't know if you can see, but like back here, these are all my badges.
Oh,
Like
all
I
your
hang them all.
badges.
Yep,
Oh,
yep,
cute.
yep. They're all back
Well,
there.
and yeah, and we met at Bouchercon in New Orleans, and
Yep.
I feel like you are the type of person who's very good at connecting other people because you were like, hey, why don't a bunch of us go on this ghost tour? And I was so glad that I got invited to that because that was
Yay.
how I because a lot of times you can go and do the panels and learn a lot, but it's
Yeah.
when you do kind of those extracurricular things besides the panels that you actually talk to people and make
hmm
friends and connections and
it makes so much difference. And again, it's funny, like I don't know that I was ever that person, that like connects people. Do you know Jason Allison? You'd probably know him if you saw him. I'm so excited. His first book is going to be coming out this year and next year. It's really great. But we became friends before we were even agented at Hampton's Whodunit. And he was like, you just like know everybody and he was like, you're the connector. He's like, you just connect them. And I was like, I guess I am. I don't know.
you've become that person. Yeah,
I've
that's
become,
yeah. Okay, so my other question though is, you're talking about Thrillerfest and then Bouchercon is the World
yeah.
Mystery Conference. So have some of your manuscripts been more thriller, or are you just kind of thinking like suspense in general, or might you write a thriller one day?
They all have a speculative bent. And
Okay.
speculative is a big umbrella. Like to me, I'm also writing an essay for Crime Reads about speculative, but it covers a lot of ground. It can cover like I feel like it can nudge into like horror, anything kind of supernatural, paranormal. It can touch into sci-fi. It's a lot of like I think Margaret Atwood said it's like what could be.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I write has to have something like that. Just for me, it's just the way I am. Like again, my dad like took me to Dairy Queens next to graveyards when I was a kid,
Oh,
so I
that
could
sounds
like,
awesome.
yeah, it was totally awesome. And tell ghost stories and so I grew up with that, and that's where my mind goes to the sort of underneath the what if.
You're like the third person I've asked this to on the podcast, but I'm just going to ask it is have you read any Jennifer McMahon books?
Oh, yes. Oh, shoot. I'm trying to remember. There was
Well,
one
her
with like,
big one is the Winter People, but she's written like The Invited and what
it's
else?
one with like a
Promise Not to
pool.
Tell. Oh, yes, The Drowning Kind.
Yes, The Drowning Kind. I read that, and I think I've read another. Yeah, she's so good. And I've seen her at conferences, and she's great.
Yeah, I might have to get her on sometime because I'm always referencing her because she writes the like, and I don't know if I think I've seen it like psychological suspense and
Hmm.
then but sometimes it's more horror, but it's almost always her books have that speculative or that like supernatural
Yep,
element to it.
always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
she's
love it.
really good.
But that's good. And I think that's good for people to hear of like, you can go, like you can go to Thrillerfest even if you're more just like writing suspense or horror. Like it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be like so,
No,
narrow.
it's not like just thriller by the numbers for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know lots of people that write horror adjacent and, supernatural and they, go to Thriller Fest.
Yeah. Well, what is something that has surprised you on your whole writing and publishing journey? And it can be something good or something bad or one of each.
Well, we touched on it a little, like the positive thing is just the generosity of the author community surprised me and dare I say, like just made me like bloom as a human. I
Oh,
mean, yeah, like when I come back from, conferences and, talk to my husband about something, he was like, you are the happiest. Like, not like I was ever particularly unhappy, but he was like, I've never seen you so in your element or so happy. I have like a bit of the tough skin from being an actor, and you need it certainly in publishing, but the community has been the most wonderful surprise. It's not necessarily a negative, but just the timeline is
hmm.
so much longer than I anticipated. When I got the deal, I was like, great, we'll have the contract done in a week. And my agent was like, no, we won't. So it took like almost 6 months before we could even make the announcement for the
Wow.
contract to
Oh,
be done.
that's got to be so hard to be like sitting on this news and you
Yeah,
can't tell
they
anybody.
they allowed me to talk about it.
Okay.
Not post about it, but I could talk about it. So I was like, good, because you're gonna have to lock me up if I can't even talk about it. So yeah, and the timeline, and then from then until like publishing, because I have so many people, family, they're like, oh, why is your book's out, right? And I'm like, no, no, no. It's like an 18-month runway, like at least sometimes closer to 2 years. But a negative, I would say, is how difficult it has become to get trade reviews, like
Mm,
Kirkus or Publishers Weekly or, Library Journal, New York Times. I mean, it's very odd. I think debuts are harder. It's not for lack of trying, certainly on my publicist part, that sort of thing. But you have to sort of let those kind of things go, and maybe, there's momentum and something would come at some later point. But yeah, so that's surprising. But I think it's like so many industries, like understaffed bookstagrammers, like thank God for bookstagrammers. They make things run. They get the word out. So they're another wonderful group of people that are really worth, getting to know and meeting, and also
mm.
hugely generous. These people just read all the time and love books and love authors, and they're so supportive. So, and they're at conferences too. So, it's great to get yourself involved with them too.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, this is just my own curiosity. So obviously, acting and writing, both a lot of rejection
Mhm.
involved. Which do you feel, and maybe just in your experience, was there more rejection or the rejection was harder? Or I don't know, maybe it's just comparing apples and oranges. I don't know.
I don't know. Oof. It's a little apple and orangey. I think, let's say we're talking about a commercial, like, I'm up for a big TV commercial or something. And you get a call back, and the running joke always is, it's like if you go in this room full of people, and usually there's a board up where they've like started pinning Polaroids of
Mm.
who's going to be what character. And sometimes you can almost see that they've already picked someone. You're like, why am I here? And they're like sitting behind a table and they're ordering sushi and not paying any attention to you. And you're like, huh. But you get used to that and you're like, whatever. publishing, there's so much, a commercial audition, it's over,
And
you
then you're
didn't get
like
it.
out of your mind.
It's out, it's gone.
Yeah.
There's something else coming up.
Yeah.
Novel writing, that was not something that took you like an hour. And it's truly out there. And it's so, I would say that it can maybe affect you more deeply for longer. But you also have to find a way to move on because you don't know. Like my husband will often say, like, or used to say, like with callbacks with commercials, and I'd be like, I can't believe I didn't get that. I like killed, like they were dying, and he was like, who knows? Maybe the producer like had bad pancakes that morning.
Well, and same thing for getting, rejected for your writing as well. I mean, I think sometimes like somebody's just not in the mood to read that type of
Yep.
writing at that point in that moment. It's like so much is luck where like you got to hit the right
Mhm.
person, the right time, right project, all
Yep.
of that.
And it is
So,
so out of your control. And that's something that I try to keep reminding myself when I start ratcheting up anxiety about things like I'm controlling and taking care of everything I can, but there's a vast ocean of things that I have no say, no control over. And that has to be okay.
yeah. Well, okay, I end every episode with a tip for the road for our listeners, and it can be a tip about writing or how to survive rejections or
Yep.
self-doubt or anything else. So what is a tip that you want to impart to us?
Well, we've hit it a couple times, but it's the biggest one for me. Get out of the writing cave. Go to conferences, go to author events. Just get out of your head, even just go for a walk. Get yourself out of here because yes, like you can't publish a book unless you write one, but getting to feel and to know the publishing community, the author community is so important. And, try and find ones near you because they can be expensive.
Hmm.
Like look online, even just find an online community, but involve yourself with other people because like I found the most dangerous thing is when I'm alone in my head, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the people that are going to support you both before
Mhm.
you have the book deal and they're going to support you when the book comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I had Vera Kurian, Laura McHugh, Jennifer Fawcett on like speed dial when I was getting the agent calls and the publishing deal. I was like, "What do you think about this? Oh my God!" And and so they were all like, "Okay, wait, hang on. Be sure you ask this." And I'm like,
I think I've said this before, either on the podcast or just in general, of like, it's always nice to have some friends who are like maybe one or two rungs ahead of you, right? So that like you said, like they've been there, but they've been
"Yep,
there recently so
hmm
that they can like help coach you along the way or like
yep."
give you advice.
Yeah, well, actually, for me, it's almost a dangerous thing. I mean, it's amazing, but that's another thing I've had to remind myself about because I have friends that are like New York Times bestsellers. I have been measuring what's
Mm,
going on now against like the launch for the puzzle box by Danielle Trussoni, and I'm like, but I can't do that because they are well established. They've had multiple books out. They're like best-selling authors, and they're years ahead of me in
right.
that regard. So I'm being unfair to myself comparing myself to, and thinking I should be at that spot. It's
Right.
nice to aspire, like, oh, cool, I've seen that happen. That's great. But to sort of try and dial it back has probably been like one of my biggest challenges.
Well, I really hope that you enjoy and celebrate your book coming out and that everybody listening to
Thank
this
you.
checks it out. I thought it was fantastic, so hopefully everybody
Thank you
else
so
will
much.
too.
I
So,
hope so.
yeah,
Not everyone's going to love every book, but I hope enough people love this one.
that's true. Thanks so much for listening to The Long Road to Publishing. All the books we discuss on the podcast can be found at my bookshop shop, the link for which is in the show notes. You can find me online on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack with the handle Eva Langston. Even better, subscribe to my newsletter for writers at evalangston.substack.com and feel free to send me an email. The podcast address is longroad.pub@gmail.com. The Long Road to Publishing is produced and edited by me, Eva Langston, And the intro-outro music comes from the artist's sound roll on Upbeat. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and I'll be back soon with more publishing stories and more tips for the road.